Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Tanja Suni. I am from the Clean Energy Transition Partnership from the Impact Network Management team, and our team aims to maximize impact and exploitation in this partnership and to help the projects do that as well. And today we have our first ever capacity building webinar on Living Labs starting up. So just briefly, the CETP partnership tries to support the projects that typically have quite a lot of questions about exploitation and impact. We know this from previous research, of course, but also because we did a little survey in our annual conference and asked the people what they need to know. And they had a lot of questions about different types of exploitation and impact activities. So what we do at the CETP Impact and Exploitation, we offer training, we offer methodologies, exercises, and also value chain contacts and wider stakeholder networks. And we do plenty of different types of matchmaking events and also training events. And today we have our first one. And all our events happen online. And the idea is that we record them all and we store the information and training material in what we call the Impact Boosting Methods Library, or Impact Library for short. And the value chain and stakeholder contacts will be stored in the Impact Network. They will be launched next year, so you'll hear more about them at that point. And this is the timeline of our capacity building events for next year. Actually, there's December already today still visible. So we have these Living Lab seminars on design thinking and co-design today, validation with end users coming up next year, and Living Lab performance and business models a little later in the spring. In the autumn, we'll be delving into exploitation in general and commercialization. In addition to these training events, we have plenty of stakeholder events coming up. This is just a snapshot of some of those stakeholder events, and you are more than welcome to join them as well. And always give us a shout if you need some information or support, and we'll try to organize that on CETP level for you. So much about what we are trying to do here. Now I welcome Professor Joel Mastelic, who is Program Manager at the Energy Living Lab Association, who helped put together this first webinar series on Living Labs, and she will guide us through our first training. Welcome, Joel.
Thank you so much for inviting me for this first capacity building webinar. We would like to talk today about Living Labs, and I will share my presentation. And wait 1 second. We will go through all the process of the Living Lab and also the design thinking with a different structure. So we will first go to what is a Living Lab and then how to manage an ecosystem of actors. We will have an expert interview to have a deep dive into one of the use cases using Living Labs. And then there is a second part on design thinking, with the different steps of the design thinking process, empathizing, ideation, and a second deep dive interview from one of our experts. You will then have at the end time for the different questions. So first, what is a Living Lab? So there are different definitions from what we use in our Living Lab. For us, a Living Lab is an innovation intermediary that orchestrates an ecosystem of actors, someone supporting the ecosystem in innovation. And the objective is to co-design products and services on an iterative way with the stakeholders. So we are using agile methods and co-design processes. And the result of this process is the co-creation of value and social value. We would like to develop a social value, meaning benefits for the society. So Living Labs exist for already 20 years, approximately, but they were predecessors. They were predecessors in the cooperative design movement in Scandinavia, also in the social experiment in IT, and in the digital cities for over the years, the concept evolved, and we were able to grasp learnings from all these different insights until the creation of HomeLab in MIT in the early 2000. So in the end of the 1990s, the Living Lab concept has emerged and came into use in US, mainly linked to test beds, so technological tests. But in Europe, the concept is mainly linked to a research context and that enables co-creation with the actors. So there are key elements in a Living Lab. First, an active user involvement. And these actors, what do? They co-design product and services together in a real-life setting. So it's only called Living Lab when there is a real-life setting with a multi-stakeholder partnership. And we use multi-method approaches, qualitative and quantitative, and a Living Lab is orchestrating the ecosystem. So there are main principles that guide the Living Labs. First, the values that gives direction to the work that we do. And also the sustainability, which is really important in Living Labs. Living Labs are working in lots of different fields, but sustainability is always something really important, a founding principle. Also openness. We are working in open innovation, meaning that this Living Lab should be open, and data as well. We're working with open data, open research, and open environment. And it should be really in real life, meaning it needs realism as a funding principle. So what are the benefits in doing this? Co-designing solution with the user, meaning that we are closer to the needs of the users. If we develop with the user and not for the users, we are able to better understand what the user needs. Also, we master the value chain because we work at different stages of the value chain together with different types of actors. And it is important to distinguish what creates value for these different stakeholders. So in Living Labs, we provide method and tools for co-design. There are, of course, challenges as well. For instance, in theoretical challenges. At the moment, there are different definitions of what is a Living Lab. And the European Network of Living Lab is working on a harmonization definition so that we work with a fundamental basis, which is the definition. Also, in terms of governance, integrating lots of different actors means that the governance needs to be well thought to know who would be managing this ecosystem, who would provide the infrastructure, the salaries, and so on. So governance and participative governance is a thematic which is really important, but also challenging. The actors' motivation and expectation. When we ask different stakeholders to collaborate, it means that we are increasing the expectation from these actors. So stakeholder expectation management is really important. In terms of ethics as well, they shouldn't be perceived as contributors without getting a value out of the process. So ethical questions need to be tackled from the beginning of the open innovation process. There are different types of Living Labs. For instance, Living Labs that are working in cities, in urban contexts, are called urban Living Labs. They are Living Labs specialized in mobility, in energy and environment, but also in health, in tourism. It can be applied, these different principles and methods, in lots of different sectors of activity. So, to better understand what is a Living Lab and how to use this method, we use this 3-layer model. In the macro level model, we are reflecting on who are the key actors. What type of governance do we want? What is the context in which this Living Labs is developing? In the meta level, we are talking about the portfolio of projects. There are different projects that are in synergies, and we use intervention, experiments in order to develop these projects. And the fact that there is a portfolio approach, it generates synergies and also continuity over the time. The micro level is about the different tools and methods that we use. And these tools can be transmitted in different ecosystems. We can use tools that exist from lots of different domains, for instance, the service design, user experience, or other domains. And we also invent new tools in the Living Labs. So we are often asked about co-creation and co-design. From the literature and from the definition, co-creation is a broad term that is the value creation of a process that we co-create with different actors. So it's really broad. And the value in energy applies when we consume energy, meaning that the value is always co-created when we consume energy. Co-design is more specific, is the fact of integrating different stakeholders that are not experts, not trained in design, into the design process, meaning that co-design is a specific instance of co-creation. So how do we manage this stakeholder ecosystem? We are referring to the quadruple helix model. What does it mean? It means that we have 4 types of actors: the public authorities, the researchers, the private companies, and also the citizen, the people. And through the combination of these 4 types of stakeholders, we are able to have different paradigms, different view of the same reality, so that we have a better understanding of what we are developing, a product, a service, a process, and it's really rich. It came from the triple helix model. So from the knowledge economy, it is well known that we combine public-private processes to develop a solution. The quadruple helix is pleading for integrating the people, such as the citizen, the customers of a company, the citizen of a city, to the design process. And then there is this quintuple helix, adding up the environment to take into account the environment, the development, such as an actor of the environment, and to design something that is also beneficial for the environment. So who are these different stakeholders that we would like to integrate in the design? They are public administration, such as the mayor of a city, the city council, the energy environment and department, the housing department. There are plenty of different actors. And when we say the city, it's not precise enough. We need to know the person that will contribute to the design of the product or the service. Then there are the research organization. And again, we are talking about personas of different participants, such as the researchers, the professor, the teacher, the students. It's always good to really define who we are integrating in the process. The private sectors as well, it can be the company that is providing a technology, such as solar panels, for instance. We can integrate the urban planners, like the companies that is professionally developing plans for cities, the network operator, the construction company, the list can be really long. In terms of people, this is the part which is most complex because often people are not federated into an institution, meaning that we need to find the multiplier. For instance, it can be a local association and the manager of this association, the apartment owners, ambassadors that you engage in your process, or tenants as well. What is very important is to find the multiplier and engage this stakeholder. So how can these different stakeholders contribute? What is really important is to determine what is the role that we would like to give them over the process. The public authorities gives a long-term vision and defines agenda for the city of the region. They provide a strategic leadership on it. And the private company can bring, for instance, the technology, would like to develop new projects with the Living Lab, and they develop knowledge as well. In research, we can integrate students into our processes, develop R&D methods, methodological support, and increase the knowledge into the Living Lab. And in terms of people, they are the expert of their own usage, meaning that we can have a deep understanding of what they need in integrating them in the design of the product or the service or the plan that we are developing. And how to do this? With participative methods, for instance, with experiments that we do in real life. Importance is to empower the citizen to engage them from the start, early on, in the innovation process. So we have developed a model in order to know what are the key partners that are in the partnership. For instance, if you have a contract, they are the people that are signing the contract. Then we have the local involvement, and then an exploration which is broader, for instance, for dissemination purposes as well. What we will really like when we do this stakeholder analysis is to understand who has an influence on the product or the service that we are developing and who is interested in the approach. And this matrix, when you have this matrix of interest influence, you can then know what to do to keep them informed, to monitor, to keep them satisfied, or engage them. But in Living Labs, what we would like is to engage as many stakeholders as possible. So if they have an interest and no power, we would like to empower them with our processes. If they have an influence but are not interested, we want to engage them in the process. So now we would like to have a deep dive with Dorian Alerts that is developing in Vito Energieville methods and tools in this Living Lab, in the Open Lab project in Genk, Belgium.
Our Living Lab is, I would say, an energy living lab. So we are developing a positive energy neighborhood in the city of Genk, Belgium. The purpose of this positive energy neighborhood is that in the end it will produce more energy than it will consume. But more importantly, or equally importantly, we also want to bring positive energy in a more, let's say, social context. So we want to bring the energy, let's say the energy topic closer to end users, and we'll also want to have them involved in the energy transition as a whole. To make this positive energy neighborhood, you need the support of the end users. They need to understand what the purpose and the end goal is. You also need to include what's important to them. And that's also something that we learned in the project, to listen really well about their specific needs and how this positive energy neighborhood can become a win-win situation for all people involved. And then in addition to the end users, you also need the municipality, you need, in our case, the housing association that is owning a number of these buildings. So it's really about finding all the actors that you need in the system in order to set up a positive energy neighborhood successfully. Throughout the first year of the project, we organized a lot of co-creation sessions. To those sessions, we mainly involved the end users, so the citizens directly involved in the neighborhood. But at the same time, in those sessions, people from research institutions like myself were present, people from the municipality were present, and in the project we also have a few industrial partners. So we also had representation from some of them, so they could explain firsthand how some of these technologies would work. We implemented a certain approach to throughout the co-creation sessions to gradually gain more insight in what was important to all the stakeholders. In the first session, we kind of discovered the topic, and the session was really broad. People could bring in their ideas, their concerns about the current living conditions, but also where they would imagine their neighborhoods going in the future. In the second session, they were asked to dream about the future system, and there were no limitations to the ideas. So any idea was valid. We documented them really well, and we also grouped them in specific topics. And then in the final session, we tried to make them more concrete and also realistic. So working around those specific topics, we tried to determine which concrete ideas would be relevant and applicable to the positive energy neighborhood or the living lab that we are now implementing. And through documenting, but also through creative exercises, we gathered a lot of material that we now also still use in our technical designs, in our architectural designs. And whenever we talk to people again, we come back to the ideas that were raised there to make it also very concrete, how their ideas translated into very concrete concepts. One major barrier, I think, is reaching the end user. We are also working in a socially vulnerable area, so even language can be a barrier, but also just convincing people that it's worthwhile to come to our sessions, to invest some of their personal time in the evenings or during the weekends to attend those sessions. But especially if you're working in a larger consortium, well, you can't expect every partner to be equally involved, and that's fine. It's about cherishing those with whom you can really go the extra mile, working with all the others to make most out of the collaboration, and ensuring that the end goal matches with everyone's interests.
So now that we have seen this deep dive into the Living Lab world, we will go step by step about the process, the design thinking process and the Living Lab integrative process. So the design thinking is an iterative process in which creators search to understand the users, challenges, assumptions, define problems, and create innovative solutions by prototyping and testing. The design thinking process is a continuous process, so it's a circular process. We try to understand the user, define the problem together, ideate on solution, prototype and test, and evaluate and study, and it starts again with understanding the users in a circular manner. So we are using these three Diamond's model to better understand the different steps. First, there is a problem discovery. We don't know exactly the problem, so we would like to search about the problem and the context. And then there is a phase that is a converging phase of problem definition. Then when we know exactly what is the problem, we go to a solution phase and a discovery of the solution. There is not only one solution, that can be plenty of different solutions when we discover different types of solution. And then again, a converging phase, selecting an idea and continuing with one solution. After these different phases, we go through the development, the agile development, when we develop the concept and prototype it and test it over lots of different variables before validating the final design and the final prototype and evaluating it with the user again. So design thinking is really about finding the sweet spot. And where is this sweet spot? Is in between the feasibility, the economic viability, and the desirability. It means that all the three needs to be really well reflected, like the technological feasibility, the economical part, and also is there a need, is there a desire for the solution that we are developing? If the three ingredients are met, then that we have a value proposition. So it begins with empathy. Empathy meaning really deep diving into the users, understanding the needs, the behaviors, to be able to understand really the user. It also needs curiosity, to be curious about the context, about the existing solution, about the life of this user and the different stakeholders. Needs as well critical thinking, question thinking, asking a lot of questions to better understand where we are, where we start, and using observation methods as well, such as ethnography, and using really the learnings from the mistakes and being able to have a continuous improvement. And all the failures can be lessons learned for the next step. So why do we need design thinking? Really to foster user-driven innovation and open innovation, opening up the barriers of the company to new ideas and developing with the user and not for the user. Working interdisciplinarily and transdisciplinarily, meaning setting objectives together with the different users. And it reduces as well the costs, because the costs arrive during the design process. If we discover a failure, the later we discover it, the more costs it will impact. Meaning that discovering the failure from the start reduces the cost of the development. And design thinking permits to tackle wicked problems that are imbricked with different variables, with different problems that are combined together. And often we cannot find solutions to problems. We are mitigating the risks, such as for climate change, for instance. So what about Living Lab methods in this design thinking approach? So the Living Lab integrative process is really integrating the design thinking steps with the problem space, the solution space, and the deployment space. And also, we are empathizing, defining the problem, ideating the differences that we are co-ideating, we are co-developing products and services together with the audience. We are doing rapid prototyping and testing and trying to disseminate as much as possible. So this is the same approach working on elements linked to sustainability. So let's deep dive into the different steps. The first step is the problem space to better understand and empathize with the problem. So how to do this? Understanding the context in which we are, the user behaviors, and also the social practices. And it can be done in lots of different ways, such as qualitative interviews, observation methods, ethnography. Really, then we try to understand the barriers, the emotions, the fears, the needs, and we develop a public-private people partnership model. In the defined space, we deep dive into reframing the problem and defining solution criteria. So we use a problem-based checklist to be sure that we have well defined this problem from the start. And it can be done, for instance, in the format of a workshop with the selected stakeholders with a problem tree. So the problem tree set the problematic, and then in the workshop, the stakeholders are engaged in finding why does it happen, and using, for instance, the 5 why model, why, the causes of this problem, and then the effect of the problem on, for instance, energy consumption. When we have really understood the problem, we go into the next phase, which is the solution space. And this solution space is about co-developing a solution together with the different stakeholders that have been selected. So we can use lots of different methods in this step, such as, again, workshop, but also online platform for crowdsourcing, and yeah, design thinking methods as well. What is really important is to develop together a common vision about the solution. What do we want to achieve? What are the objectives with the solution that we are designing? So the problem-solving phase can generate lots of different ideas. So the example of problem statements, the energy transition in the neighborhood is not supported enough, or the collective and scalable renovation are not facilitated. And then when we have this problem statement, we can formulate a question such as how to bring innovative and green technologies to the area and raise awareness on why the energy transition is so important. And then when the problem is defined, we can go into co-designing a solution. So it means building trust among the stakeholders, building trust and creating an environment to work together. Ensure the engagement and the involvement of the different stakeholders and not only the user, and empowering the participants. So it means as well raising awareness on the intervention that we are providing. Again, there are lots of different methods and tools, such as serious game, to do it. In the Energy Living Lab, we have developed a serious game to use it as an intermediary between the different stakeholders. And this is a game to develop scenarios of the future. In the energy sector, there is a low energy literacy. So the different audience, they don't know much about energy, meaning that this game can be used by for instance, children to develop scenarios for the future of a city without any knowledge about energy. So tools are really rich, and we have provided some links in this presentation to be able to get lots of tools from European projects, from different initiatives, from Living Labs, to test different methods in the project to co-design solutions together with the different stakeholders. Now we will go into the second deep dive with Dimitri Schurman from IMEC in Belgium, with a lot of experience in Living Labs.
I work for IMEC already quite some years. IMEC is a technology institute, and there I have developed an innovation management approach where I try to involve, because the technology guys, they're really thinking technology push research agenda, pushing really their research agenda. And my role is really to get also outside in, to really look into the needs of stakeholders, the needs of end users, and also find a fit between concrete problems and with technological opportunities. There are a lot of different processes and phases and stages. I like to keep it quite simple. And I think you first have a problem phase where you really focus on the problem and you do different activities to really get in sync, to empathize with your users, with your stakeholders, and to really get a clear picture of what the problem is. Once you identify it, or you think we know the problem well enough, you come to a solution phase or a solution space where you really try to come up with solutions, ideations, etc. Sometimes the phases can be a little bit interlinked, that already during when you're investigating the problem, some ideas arise. Of course, that's no problem at all, but those are, for me, two separate stages or phases. And then you need to test whether this problem meets whether this solution meets the problem. So it's a question, they call it an innovation management problem solution fit, but I think that that's a good way of describing it. And then once you have attained a desirable level of, okay, we feel that we have the right features, we have the right outcomes, then you go to the next phase where you go to, I call it an adoption diffusion space, where you do more large-scale testing. I think in the solution phase, you shouldn't necessarily develop, but you fake or you mimic the solution, and then you go to develop the solution and you test it in more real-life, longer-term contexts. And then once you get that successful, you can go to a scaling phase where it's mostly about the business model. But as I said, you should also think about the business model at first. In the problem stage, it's more about the user and the problem and the needs, but also think about, okay, but could there be a business model? Because if you don't think about it at all, yeah, then you will only find it in the last phase. But basically, those are the four phases, and of course, yeah, they're interlinked. If you at some point say, this doesn't really work, then you go back to the previous phase. So it should be not really step by step, but really an iterative, co-creative process. We used to have our own panel of end users. We don't do it anymore because we now have more, let's say, diverse set of projects. But when you are, let's say, in one topic, in one domain, you can have, and you know you will have multiple projects in a certain amount of time. It can make sense to have a panel. We had a panel for, I think, 5 years, but it takes a lot of hard work, but then you have them at hand. When you have a new task, when you have a new project, you can simply call them, send them an email, and you have them profiles ready to be involved in your activities. Right now, we rely more on, let's say, stakeholder groups that are in sync with their communities. Because there are a lot of, let's say, community working groups, umbrella organizations, and we tend to use them because the good thing is that you can also involve some of these people in your co-creation activities because they have a lot of knowledge, of course, on their groups. And if you then need to get to their members or to their communities, they can facilitate this. it's an eternal question about the incentives, but I think my vision on that is quite clear. I don't think you should overpay them to be there. Otherwise, we used to call them gold diggers. They're simply in there to take the money. You should make your co-creation activities fun. Of course, it should be in sync with what you want to reach, with your eventual end goals, but that doesn't stop you from making the activity creative and a bit fun. Next to the fun, communication is important. What happens with my contribution? What is the outcome? What is the end goal? That they're not left, okay, I have contributed and I don't hear anything again out of the project. No, they should know. Even if you don't do anything with their contribution, they should know why. And then they get intrinsic motivation. That's way better than motivation to do it for the money, but really get them that they found it fun, that they learned something. And if you give incentives, and it's okay to give an incentive, but make it that it's something linked to the topic, that they get some kind of benefit, early access to the innovation, or something a bit similar, and then they are really, really happy. And you don't say it up front, you will get this incentive. No, do it maybe a bit as a surprise, and then they will be very happy.